So I'd like to call this second Budget Committee meeting to order at 6:03. And we took care of a lot of business. Let's see. So I'm sorry, I'm looking at the agenda. I forgot I was going to be running it. So we're going to receive an updated budget message from Paula.
I don't have an updated message per se. The only thing I want to clarify, perhaps, I know there's been some questions about the increases for salaries, and we share some survey that HR Answers put together, and also some spreadsheet that we put together. There's been some corrections that we made there, and just to make it clear, because on that spreadsheet there's a lot of information, and it also includes items that have already been passed by the budget committee in the past. So we had an initial request for salaries in 2019, and then there was a $50,000 to start that correction of salaries, plus then the COLA, the cost of living there, and those have already all been approved in the past. So when you look at today, all we are looking at, after we went through a lot of corrections, Mark and I put together, and if you want, he can share that screen with you. But basically, what it comes down to is the actual request for this year, in addition to what we already done in the past, it's only 8.2%. So if you, I want you to focus on the two highlighted columns at the right end there of the spreadsheet. So we started with the original budget, which was requested last year, and then there was that $50,000 that was given, which we only used up about $49,372, as you see in the totals in the bottom, and then so that basically gave each one a salary of what you see after that. And then, of course, we had a COLA adjustment, and that basically put everyone on the salary after budget COLA and incentive. Those are the current salaries. As you can see, my salary was never increased because that was done by commission, and I had Mark correct the actual amount, because again we had a number there of 144, because that was just on the budget, because we didn't know what the commission was going to do for my salary, and then we everything else, you know, some of them are very small because we already gave most of their increase during that $50,000, you know, increment. So bottom line is, as you can see, you know, between the budget amount for 2021 and the current actual right now, we're only looking at 8.2% increase. So I just want to make that clear, because I think there's been a lot of confusion. You know, in a sense, we have been doing this increases incrementally. So we did some through the last year's budget. Now we're trying to do additionally based on the salary survey and everything else we looked at through this budget, which again comes up to about 8.2. Normally an 8.2 would be a little larger than usual increase if you were just, you know, doing a normal year. But just remember, we're not going through a normal year. We are doing some of those adjustments to clean up things that we want to make sure it moves forward in the future the proper way. From now on, you probably won't see this type of requests. So I just want to make that clear. And so I don't know if you have any questions about that. Everything else, it's pretty much the same.
Any questions for Paula?
Yeah, Paul, this is Gil. So first of all, before I have a question, I want to apologize to the budget committee and staff for missing the last meeting. So that was a total screw up on my part. I thought meeting was in my calendar, but it did not get into my other calendar that I normally use. And quite frankly, I just rely on my calendars too much. I usually look ahead to plan based on what's on my calendar. So I apologize for missing that meeting. I guess one quick question based on listening to your conversation at the budget meeting. I did listen to the whole conversation. I thought you guys had a good review of the whole budget and raised some really good questions. But one thought I had was moving forward and trying to figure out salaries and what is appropriate salaries. What should we be thinking? And I realize that's not for this approved budget, but is there a trajectory of salary increases still to be done over the next, let's say, 3 to 5 years to get people to where they should be? Was it quite clear to me how that's going to work?
Right, right. Well, I think what we're trying to do here during this meeting, it's pretty much putting us overall in a much better place. I think the only thing that I probably would continue looking at in the future perhaps is the maintenance. And one of the reasons is we tend to have a hard time finding people that can actually pass a drug test and is willing to make what we're offering here. It seems like when you look at similar jobs somewhere else, you know, it's hard to compare, and especially with the cost of living here in Newport. So we will continue monitoring that and looking at to see, I mean, especially when we have something like the COVID pay that those folks are getting $600, you know, a week for being unemployed. A lot of people don't want to come out of that to get pay, you know, similar amount of having to work. So, so it put us in a very tough position. So, but we'll keep monitoring that, and that may be one area that we will continue looking at. The other positions, I think we're in a comfort zone now where we feel like we need to be. It's only going to matter if, you know, as people, if we have to replace people, either they leave or they retire, you know, and as we're getting new people, where that falls in. And the other thing is we hire new people, you know, if we really feel like we have the need for new positions in the future. But at the moment, I think this put us in a good position. So again, we probably won't be coming back next year asking for similar thing. This is kind of something out of the ordinary, just because in the past couple of years, the port made a point of adjusting salaries to bring people up to the market, you know. And I even talked to other ports, and they said I talked to the director for the Port of Astoria, and he said he tried to look at some of our numbers for comparison when he was negotiating some, and he said, wow, it was so low that I didn't even use it, you know. And it was true, especially for the on the maintenance side of things. It was so low that it was difficult for people to use. So those are the type of things that we'll keep looking at it. Bottom line is we got to be able to be competitive and be able to keep people here and be able to hire people when we need them. And have good people. I don't want to, I mean, I've been here for 1 year, and gosh, how many people have we gone through on commercial maintenance, Aaron? Probably like 4 people.
We've turned over 5.
5, okay, 5. I mean, that's a lot. And some of those people we pay to train them, you know, we send them to Salem, we send them to other places to get trained. And that turnover, it gets expensive.
But you feel like that's a pretty competitive list at the moment. Like those salaries are competitive. You're not trying to do another 10% next year. You feel settled.
We'll find out. Hopefully we'll be at a place where we can keep people. Right now we're trying to hire some seasonal staff, and we just can't get anyone to apply, and the ones that apply already have drug problems, and they say it up front. And when we have people driving heavy equipment, things like that, you just can't do it. So we got to be able to get to a point where we're able to hire people and have them pass a drug test. So that's what it comes down to. So I don't foresee that being the case, but I don't know. We hope so.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Yeah, so I want to thank you for that last graph, Mark and Paul. I think that answered a lot of questions, because that was my main concern was, you know, we're looking at a pretty large number, and I know we had done some catching up, but the overall increases are not as large as I was thinking me at the first ask. So thanks for that clarifying.
And we'll be happy to send that to you too, by the way.
I had some of the same thoughts Walter just had, looking at it more, getting more information from Paula and Mark, and looking at things, and I feel better about things than when I initially looked, and so thank you for that.
Glad to help.
So this is Gil. So one thought I had, though, was looking at the salary increases. I was also trying to add on health benefit cost increases, as well as for those who are getting PERS. And I know you discussed PERS a fair amount. So I was trying to get a sense of what that trend is for personnel over time. And will it make up a larger proportion of the budget? And will we not be, we don't want to be surprised by it creeping up over the next 2 to 5 years and realize, gee, instead of, we thought it was 100,000, but it's actually 300,000 now, much larger than what we thought it would be. That was the thought I had in thinking long-term on the budget.
Yeah, Gil, that's a great question, because our health insurance cost went up 19% this year, as it did for every other person that is insured by SDIS. Our new agent of record came back to us with proposals for different insurances. They're all about the same cost. They were all right within 5% of each other. So we actually did that comparison. As far as PERS, our liability should decline very rapidly, especially as we move out in about 17 years. It's anticipated to be near zero. And I shared that with the specific chart with Jeff separately on that. So because we have 3 or 4 tier 1 and tier 2, and everyone else here is IAP. So our liability is actually quite small.
Yeah, so as a university employee for 30 years, receiving PERS, I've watched all the changes the legislature's made to try to get this under control. So as a taxpayer, it's good to see it getting under control. So that's really good. But it is something maybe that, and I don't know, and I was going to make another suggestion when we get to it, or when you want to talk about more broadly how the reports should look for budget reports. I have some ideas based on the discussion you guys had and based on reading it over. But we can talk about that when it's time, or I'm not sure how you're handling the meeting today. We're just kind of jumping around, or are we just trying to focus on salary at the moment?
Well, this is an opportunity to add anything else if you didn't have a chance, and there's anything else you want to add. I mean, the main focus for the meeting was to be able to review this a bit more with the salaries, but also give you, Gil, an opportunity to participate, since you're the economist of the group, and be able to, add any thoughts. So.
Yeah. All right. Well, as an economist, my wife's an accountant, so I always compare an economist versus an accountant. There's major differences, actually. So it's very interesting how we approach things. So in listening to discussion, in reading over the budget, I felt pretty good about the budget. And the sense I got from the rest of you, you also felt pretty good about the budget. One reason is because we look at the budget every month, right? We look at costs, we look at the budget, we compare what it was last year, and we've also been talking about our strategic plan and the projects and budgeting for those. So what's good about the process is I didn't see any surprises, right? I might have had some technical questions here and there, and I don't think I'm going to weigh the group down in that. But in general, I feel the feelings of the rest of the group. I think we're budgeting responsibly. We have a decent reserve that even under the worst case scenario, it looks like we're not being hit by the COVID-19 issues very hard in general. Although, who knows, trying to predict exactly what will happen. I think the portfolio of revenue we have for this port really helps given its diverse distribution, so we're not overly reliant on any one sector. And again, I like the sense I was getting and reading through the budget was planning for projects. Now that though ties to where I was a little confused in listening to the discussion about the project. That was page 24. I don't know if you want to put that up on the screen again. So this port has a lot of projects, right? 25, I think we're 25, maybe I miscounted, but something like that on that page.
25.
I know that Jeff, was trying to get a handle on, exactly what you were going to be spending on and focusing on versus those that you may not. And I know that's a hard conversation because you never know what's going to pop up, right? All of a sudden, one of those projects, there's a funding source and you might go from low to high priority. But where I was getting confused and listening to all your discussions was each of those are projects that my sense is we're planning on. We're in some sense of planning. We may not be in a sense of actually implementing, and here's where it gets a little confusing, funding the support planning. That's one type of funding. And then there's the funding for the actual project after planning. And then there's the final implementation of the project. Yeah, here we are. And the actual project itself. And I thought some of the confusion in the discussion was over that issue of trying to plan for budgeting the plan, trying to get funding for a plan, and then funding for the actual project. And I didn't know if there was a better way to lay this table out to avoid that confusion. So we could get a sense of, in some cases you show you have a grant, right? And that with the grant there and having the port provide its necessary match, and you can see that in a number of these projects, that phase is underway. But I wonder if it might be some way to make that explicit. So I think, go ahead.
No, please finish up.
Well, explicit to who, Gil?
Well, to slow economists like me. So I have a sense of what phase of the project we're in. Are we trying to plan for the? Are we trying to fund the plan? Are we trying to fund the project? And some sense of when we're looking to actually implement the project. Even though I realize we're not going to stick to that in many cases, it would be good to know. Are we targeting a given year? So it would give us a better sense of planning toward that and where we are in the stages of designing a plan, funding a plan, then funding the getting, we may have a plan, but then we have to go after the funding for the plan. We get the funding for the plan, and then we actually implement the plan, and then we complete the plan. And I just thought that if I had some sense of that and some time elements associated with that, years, it would be a much better sense of where we are with all of these. Because I assume all of these are projects that we want to do and we'll be working on. We may not necessarily implement them in terms of whatever phase that is this year, but we're in different phases of those plans all the way across the 25, from where we're actually implementing the plan, the final construction plan, or service plan or equipment to complete, almost completing it this year, what will be completed this year, and then going back to even trying to find funding for develop a plan. And one thing I am very supportive of is finding the funding for these plans. I agree with the commission, with the commissioners and the budget folks and the staff that it's critical to do that, to spend that money in developing those plans, because without that, we can't go to the key players and get the support we need to make that happen. And a lot of these plans here are 5-year plans, even maybe longer than that, 7-year plans. Others are 1 to 2 years. Anyway, sorry to go on so long about it, but I think this is a really important sheet. It really tells the story of what this port's trying to do. And it's a very important part of the larger, longer-term budget thinking.
Well, my understanding of this list was that it was a priority list that allowed you guys to shuffle the deck and take advantage of opportunities when they come up, kind of to your best judgment and wisdom.
Yeah, so basically, there's a lot of way to skin the cat here. You know, we could take this spreadsheet and do it many different ways. We could separate them by plans, by deferment maintenance that needs to be taken care of. We can do it by new capital projects, right? And then projects that have been put on the back burner that are not defer maintenance, but are, you know, projects that has been discussed before. But what we base this on, Gil, mostly, if you look at the strategic plan, I would say most of these projects are, all of these projects in one way or another, either by, you know, being projects that could create revenues, which the plan talk about, or projects that are very specifically spelled out on the strategic plan. So the concept of the strategic plan is it's a 5-year strategic plan, right? So the intent here is eventually is to trying to get that $27 million list of projects completed. So with that, we had to start somewhere. So we went through the strategic plan and came up with the projects that we felt like would need some priorities. And then again, some of them are plans, so we can eventually be ready for those other projects that are also listed on the strategic plan, because you cannot go from zero to having a project. You have to have a plan. And we're getting ready. We don't want to, because if you wait another year to put the plan in place, that means probably another 2 or 3 years before you build the project, right? Because you gotta put the plan in place, then you gotta go through finding money, then you gotta go through getting permits and all that good stuff. And some projects may take another year after the plan is ready. Some projects may take 2 or 3. In some projects, we may never find the money and may have to keep on postponing. In some projects, we may choose that even if we don't have some of the grants that we are hoping for, it is important enough that we just need to move forward. It may not be this year, but it may be next year or something like that. And then there's definitely those deferred maintenance projects that we got to get them done, because if we don't, those projects may end up doubling in price in the future or fall apart. You know, some of our docks got to, you know, some things need to be done, otherwise they'll fall apart. So, but the essence of this list that you put in, that you're seeing, it's mostly based again on the fact that we had to come up with some prioritization that we felt like it makes sense, and then, you know, Mark lists the possible source of funds, and we'll be looking at everywhere. It doesn't mean it has to be where we're listing. And again, we may get it, we may not. Some of the plans, we don't know yet. With the COVID thing happening this year, some things may be very more unlikely that we'll get it. But if the project is not on the budget, we definitely won't get it. So we figure we'll put it in there. We'll see, we'll try our best to get that, always keeping in mind that that reserve, you know, of 1 million, actually, we really want to keep it at 1.2 million if all possible. And if we find something that we're getting towards the end of the year and we still haven't been able to, or at a point that we find that is important, that we're not getting that grant money, we may come to you as the commission, on a commission side, and say, listen, we don't believe we're going to get the grant for this, but this project is important enough. It's really up to you if you want to move forward, especially on some of the planning side. So.
Yeah, no, I generally understand that. And as I say, I was listening. The reason I'm commenting, I was listening to the discussion, and I found that there was a lot of focus on this page and a lot of discussion. And part of it that I found a little confusing in listening to your discussion was this idea of what phase of planning are we really in, and what is the expectation to have it completed, in order to give context to looking at this and thinking about all these projects. I understand they're kind of in a list of priorities, which of course can be switched around depending when money's available. I understand the flexibility. But I think this is such a core part of our thinking long-term about funding and budgets and projects. And I just was trying to think of ways that would better communicate, including to our freeholders and to the rest of the budget committee and the public, exactly where we are in the stages of this plan. So maybe that's a different sheet, and maybe not what you were trying to do here, just by showing roughly the 25 projects and some sense of the budgets around them, at least some initial ones. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
One thing I can add is if again, the intent obviously is if those projects, we get funding for them, is to complete them all within that fiscal year. Should we do that? Should we move forward with any of those projects, especially the major capital projects? We will keep posting information on those projects, you know, and let the people know where we are. Again, a lot of those are on the strategic plan, which sort of give an idea of timeline, because we do have on the strategic plan, the capital projects do have timelines. Again, those are living documents, you know, those things change as necessary, but that's the initial concept for this and how we try to create the budget. But as we get a project moving, like for instance the Dock 5 Pier project, which we know we're already moving forward because we got the grant for that project, you know, we'll, as we are moving forward, we're going to be giving updates and where we are with them. Most likely have information on our website, on Facebook. We'll be sending e-blasts and things like that, and let the community know where things are, especially those projects that take a while, you know, so they can understand. So that's the intent as we move forward. But the concept is for the plans, they obviously is just a plan at this point, but without them we cannot get anywhere else. But we can certainly, if we get them moving forward, then we can come up with the idea of when we get them, if they get funded. At one point we have a schedule for it. At this point, again, it's just the plan in order to go chase money.
Okay, anything else we wanted to bring up before we move on to cash flow?
Yeah, Jeff, I had one question here. Say, Paula, this is on number 9 on the project list on South Beach electric load centers. What is the priority on that? Because I know that was one of our top priorities last year, and now it's down to number 9 on this list. Does that reflect the time that it's going to get done or the priority that it has?
No. The priority list, it has nothing to do with timeline. It has to do with, it needs to be done within the importance of to be done within this year. That is absolutely, again, it's one of those defer maintenance that we want to get it done as soon as possible. And maybe Aaron can speak more to it, but you know, number 9 and number 1 were very close, Walter, to be quite honest. We're like, okay, we can put this here, because it's like those first, especially the first 10 projects here, we're like, oh, we really got to get those done. And if you go down the list, you know, you can probably say almost the same for the next few projects, but that's sort of how we felt.
No, thanks for that, Paul. I just wanted to make sure that something that was, you know, top 3 last year doesn't all of a sudden become number 9 this year.
No.
Okay, and so we're going for a lot of grants, and I'm seeing the grant amounts and then operating fund. Would that be what our expected match for those grants would be?
Yeah, so most grants are usually within about 20 to 50% match.
Mm-hmm.
And we are trying to mostly look at 20%. And if there are some of the grants that we already know, like for instance, the one with the Corps of Engineer, that they require 50%. Often federal grants require 50%.
Right.
State grants tends to be 20%. So, you know, we'll play around with those, you know, but we'll go for it as much as we can. That's the bottom line.
Okay, that's great. You know, for next year when we do that, maybe put a instead of operating fund, you know, an estimate on matching funds for grants, just to single it out, so we weren't just taking it out of the budget right away.
Okay.
Kind of an idea. You know, if we do get all these grants, we're looking at a significant hit on the budget, which I don't mind paying if we get all those grants, but it's just something that we need to be more cognizant of.
That's what we'll be watching the cash flow for on these things.
All right, thanks.
A difficult situation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions before moving on to cash flow?
Yeah, Jeff, this is Jim. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm on the road. I apologize. I briefly got in on my iPhone and then I switched over to my laptop, but my Wi-Fi is a little bit limited, I'll say. I just wanted to say I appreciate all the planning, and I think it's a very forward-looking way to do it. And I think it's imperative that we interpret this very clearly to maybe with a press release, maybe with our PR, but just helping people understand that this is planning, not what we're looking to bite off. We've gone around and around on this, and Paul has explained it many, many times, and I totally get it, but just helping the public understand it is probably pretty important. And I apologize for being late. I'm on the road and it's limited Wi-Fi. So anyway, thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I had a comment here. I too appreciate the effort went into drawing up this budget. And I understand and appreciate maintaining the assets of the port, you know, for longevity of the port's existence. But I'm kind of curious on the priority projects here of the one asset that the port has that seems to be underutilized, yet has probably the most potential for new revenues generated and jobs. The international terminal, why it's lower on the list of priorities. I would think even number 15 on the list, consultant to determine opportunities and uses of the international terminal. And if I look there, it looks like you could get a grant for 22,500 of the 30,000, which would be a cash outlay of the port of 7,500. Why wouldn't we be pursuing this as a priority item here just for its potential for the port? The other projects, they're necessary, and needed, and especially like dredging, that's a very important, and maintaining the facilities, but they're really not going to generate that much new revenue. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the one I see, the one asset that the port has is the international terminal that is not being used anywhere close to its potential. So, go ahead.
What I can say, what I can add to that from our discussion here as we're trying to prioritize, the difference is with the dredging of, as we're looking to do, put together this plan for Dock 7, without having the depth, the draft that we need there, it would still not do much of what it needs to do. And currently we already have some work being done by the Corps of Engineers, which they put in $100,000 into see if this is something they want to pursue. Okay, and if they come up and say yes, this is feasible, which is very unusual for the Corps of Engineers to even agree to work on a channel, a marina channel like that, because they don't typically touch that, but they have a special kind of fund that they're pulling that from, and they had agreed to this year to do that work that cost them $100,000, so they're paying 100%. And if that goes forward, they will automatically move forward to the next step, which is the feasibility study, which is that particular item that we added there. So it is a fund that is already available if they agree to move forward with it. It's not something we have to chase. So for that reason, we don't want to lose that opportunity. And that's one of the reasons it's one of the top items there. But that doesn't mean that, at least in my view, that the international terminal is less important. The difference is there's not much that needed to be done physically or materially to the international terminal. We can still pursue customers to that area. And what I was really trying to do is it's get more to the nitty gritty of, the people that really understand that market, and see if we can get additional help on pursuing specific business that could come there. And I would love to do that. And by keeping everything the way it is, that doesn't mean we're gonna pursue that opportunity less than we will pursue the dredging of the channel. I'm still gonna go after that and really trying to obtain grants, if we can get the grants to do that plan, and get with a consultant to help us through with this, because I find it also extremely important. Sometimes when you create those priorities, it doesn't mean necessarily that, well, I'll work on this first and then I'll move on to this. It's more of like, if you feel like our budget then reach a point where we need to drop some, where would that be dropped from? And that's still far away from where that would be dropped. I would absolutely imagine and hope that that would not be one of the projects to be dropped. But that's more of the prioritization versus actually going after the projects.
Yeah, well, I think it's a wonderful idea, because if you can identify who these potential users are and you can make contact with them, that shows them right up front, hey, they're saying they're open for business. Let's look into this, and something could come out of it. But if you don't ever have that communication established, you know, why you're kind of waiting for something to happen, going out and making something happen. So,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you.
I do want to say on that, I don't think Paula's been waiting for something to happen. I think she has been proactive. I just want to say that.
No, I wasn't meaning that at all, because I have talked to Paula and it does sound like she has been pursuing it. So, but yeah, I'd like to see it priority, and it looks like funding wise that, you know, if you can get that grant, it would be a doable item on your list here.
Anything else before we move on to cash flow? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and look over the cash flow. I believe there was a document in the packet on that.
So the cash flow, one with the 1 million in reserves and another with the top 18 projects. And what Paula said was exactly right. All projects in our view were critical, but we only have so much cash. What this does is look at what our opening balance is, how much income we expect, what our expenses are, how much grant funding, what our capital projects is, and what our ending balance should be based on that. And I apologize for the microphone. It's a relatively new camera, it's gravelly. Yeah, so that's what it is. It's looking at how we can do this. And maintain, the $1 million balance. You know, with the top 18 projects, we're able to maintain in excess of $1 million balance. Was exciting to me. I didn't think we could do it, but we do have to get all the grant funding in that as well.
I appreciate you putting this together, and I know I took a bit of time in the last budget meeting going through asking some questions, but I think I've gotten a real good sense of the budget and what we can do here. I thought about it, and there's 4 things I wanted to make sure from my standpoint that I felt comfortable that this budget did and the port was doing. And the 4 things are that the budget will provide for good port operations, and that 2, it will allow infrastructure and deferred maintenance to be addressed, including long-term planning. And 3, that it pays down debt, and 4, that it keeps sufficient reserves. And I believe the budget does all this, and this cash flow document helped me sort of walk through that and give me some confidence. And also Paula and Mark talked about watching the cash flows, watching the reserves, and this being sort of a never-ending process. And so I appreciate all that.
Yeah, this is a first step in cash flows, because really what I want is something like this for 5 years. So we're working on our total maintenance plan, our total capital plan, and we're putting together a 5-year plan of cash flows. And that's, to me, that's just as important as the 1 year, because we could do something, if we're not careful, inadvertently, that hurts us, and we just don't want to do that.
And perhaps one thing I was talking to Mark about, having this 5-year plan on the budget side, it would help with what Gilt said earlier, you know, what plans, you know, from this, what's going to become a project, what's going to happen, what's not going to happen, when it's going to happen. So for instance, if we're putting a plan on the budget, for instance, as we're trying to create this 5-year plan, we can start listing those projects way out and trying to figure out what we can afford, what we cannot, when can we afford. So those are the type of things that, you know, moving forward, I think it makes it easier for us to have an understanding. It's hard to say, well, this year we're focused on this, let's get it done. And then I don't want to put together a whole bunch of plans and then put them on the shelf. You know, we need to have plans to incorporate the plans. So, you know, I think it's important to make sure we do those things. And again, having that reserve, it's extremely important. And I tell you why. Right now, for instance, we're lucky that, as one of the members mentioned, that the fact that we have a diversified, you know, business here, it really helps, you know, because a lot of ports that I spoke to are having difficulties. They're losing money, they furlough people, it's been extremely difficult for them. But you never know how things can hit you and how they can hit you. So I think it's very important, because we got lucky here this time with this COVID thing, that it didn't hit us as hard, you know, but it could have. And if it did, how could we get through? You know, it's by having this reserve. So I think it is extremely important to have that, and I'll make sure that we'll keep that and keep you informed on how we are utilizing these funds. So.
Any other questions or comments on the cash flow? Okay, on to agenda item 4, final review of proposed budget. Does anybody have anything at all about the budget? Any review or any comments, Paula? Or anybody? Okay, I think I basically said my overview of what the budget was and what the 4 things I think it needs to do, it does, and I appreciate that. And that's basically my comment on it. Anybody else? Well, if not, I think we're ready to go to public comment, public questions or comment. I don't know, Mark or Paula, if we have anybody or.
We had just one little comment. It was a positive comment. Karen, can you read that, please?
So we had a comment from Tom Simpson, said he was representing seniors, and his comment was regarding the Section 4 recreational launch fees. The only line item that affects me is for the annual launch seniors resident, which is proposed to go from $50 to $52. I don't believe there has been an increase in this line item in several years, and a $2 increase is reasonable. Thank you.
Okay. So is that it for our public comment? Nobody online? Okay. I guess we're ready to move to item 6, approval of budgets. I don't know if anybody has any discussion, or during this we could also would entertain a motion for approval. There's sample motions on page 2 of the agenda. One for budget approval, one for approval of tax rate for the fiscal year. So with that, I'll open it up.
This is Jeff Johnson. I move that the Budget Committee approve the proposed budget as presented for the Port of Newport's 2020-2021 fiscal year.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Jeff, this is Jim. I will second that. Thank you, Jeff.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay. Karen, do we want a roll call or do we want to raise hands or? Can't hear you.
You're on mute, Karen.
That it eventually will only be sound. So if you want to ask if they approve, and if anybody does not, if nobody says nay, then we can probably go with.
Okay. All those in favor, say aye.
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 All those opposed? Okay, nobody's opposed. The motion
8
passes.
to 0, correct?
Okay. All right, so now we have, actually it's item 7 on the agenda, approval of the tax rate for the port's fiscal year 2021 to submit to the assessor, and there's a sample motion there if any I would entertain.
This is Jeff Johnson again. Based on the port's bonded debt fund balance of $334,400 US, per its audited financials as of June 30, 2017, I move that the Budget Committee approve the tax rate of 6.09 cents per 1,000 of assessed value for operating purposes in the general operating fund, and in a fixed amount of $520,000 US for payment of general obligation bond principal and interest in the bonded debt fund for the 2018-2019 fiscal year.
I'll second that.
All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Before we adjourn, any comments?
I just want to say thank you to all the members. And
So much.
And, thanks to all the staff for all the work they did to put this together.
Yes, thanks so much to staff. And I want to thank the freeholders again for stepping up and serving in your community. And thanks a lot.
Thank you.
And with that, the meeting's
Thank you.
adjourned.
Adjourn.
All right.
Thank you, everybody.
All
Have a
right,
good
goodbye.
evening.
Good night, folks.
thank you so much.
Good night.
What time do you have, Jeff?
6:56.